The world made you a promise. It was etched into the bedrock of civilization, taught in your schools, whispered by your parents. Be good, work hard, and life will treat you fairly. But that promise is a ghost, a phantom that haunts the unmarked graves of the honorable and the naive. Why did they lie to you? They didn't. They were simply repeating a lie told to them, a beautiful poison passed down through generations that keeps the weak hoping and the powerful in control. This poison has a name: fairness. You have been taught to crave it, to demand it, to rage at its absence. You believe it is a virtue, a right, a cosmic law that has somehow been broken in your case. This is your first and most critical error. The demand for fairness is not a virtue, it is a vice. It is a psychological addiction that guarantees your servitude. It is a narcotic for the soul, dulling the sharp edges of reality and replacing the drive for action with the paralysis of resentment. The man who waits for fairness is a man who waits for a ship in the middle of a desert. He will die of thirst, cursing the sand for not being an ocean. Look closely at the world around you. Observe the men who rise and the men who fall. The fallen are invariably those who speak of what they are owed, of what is right, of the injustices they have suffered. Their energy is consumed in a constant, bitter accounting of cosmic debts they believe the world owes them. They measure their lives not by their achievements, but by a ledger of perceived slights. This obsession, this addiction to being wronged, is the most potent chains ever forged. It keeps you staring at the past, at the injury, while your rivals, unburdened by such moral baggage, are seizing the future. The world, in its raw and unfiltered state, is not a courtroom presided over by a benevolent judge. It is an arena, and in this arena, there are no rules of engagement, only outcomes. To demand fairness from your competitor, your superior, or your enemy is to announce your weakness to them in the clearest possible terms. It tells them that you have no other leverage. It signals that you have abandoned the acquisition of real power in favor of appealing to a non-existent higher authority. It is the equivalent of a lamb trying to reason with a wolf about the ethics of hunger. The wolf does not care for your arguments. It is driven by a force far more fundamental. That force is necessity. While you are drafting your list of grievances, the man of power is acting upon his needs. While you seek validation for your feelings of being wronged, he is securing resources, forging alliances, and neutralizing threats. He does not see you as a moral equal with a valid complaint. He sees you as a resource to be managed or an obstacle to be removed. Your pleas for justice are, to his ears, nothing more than the bleating of sheep. It is a sound that signals not a problem to be solved, but an opportunity to be exploited. This is the first brutal truth you must accept. Your hope for a just world is the very thing preventing you from succeeding in the world as it truly is. It is the venom that flows through your veins, making you slow, predictable, and ultimately consumable. Now let us turn from the poison to the physician. Not a physician who offers you comforting lies and sweet syrups, but one who performs the surgery required for survival. Niccolo Machiavelli is this physician of power. He does not write to soothe you, he writes to awaken you, to arm you. He saw this sickness of hope in the princes and republics of his time and diagnosed it with chilling precision. His prescription is not a moral philosophy, but a practical one, an antidote forged in the fires of political reality. The core of his treatment is the replacement of one concept with another. You must purge the idea of fairness from your strategic mind and replace it with the cold, immutable iron of necessita. Necessity. This is the great engine of history, the architect of empires, and the executioner of the naive. The storm does not ask if the ship's captain is a good man. It asks only if he has the skill and the will to do what is necessary to keep his ship from being torn apart on the rocks. The plague does not distinguish between the sinner and the saint. It merely follows the necessities of its own nature. Power operates under this same unforgiving logic. Machiavelli's core lesson is this: a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to ruin among so many who are not good. Read those words again. He is not advising you to be evil. He is providing a diagnosis of the environment. He is telling you that to operate under a personal moral code that is not shared by your competitors is a form of suicide. The prince, The strategist, the man who wishes to build something that lasts, cannot afford this brand of self-deception. His first victory must be an internal one, the murder of his own idealism. He must cease asking the world to conform to his morality and instead conform his actions to the world's reality. Therefore, the governing question of the powerful is never, is this action fair, or is this decision right? The only question that matters, the only question that leads to survival and dominion, is a single, chilling inquiry: what is necessary? This question is a clarifying fire. It burns away all the confusing fog of morality, sentiment, and ego. What is necessary to secure my position? What is necessary to weaken my rival? What is necessary to ensure the loyalty of my followers? What is necessary to prevent future rebellion? Sometimes the answer may align with conventional goodness. Generosity can be necessary to foster loyalty. But often the answer will be brutal. Deception will be necessary. A calculated act of cruelty will be necessary. The sacrifice of a loyal but incompetent subordinate will be necessary. The man who hesitates in these moments, who weighs the fairness of the act, is a man who is already lost. He is still a prisoner of the poison. The prince, having taken the antidote, acts with the swift, impersonal finality of a natural disaster. He is not driven by anger or malice, but by a clear-eyed understanding of cause and effect. He understands that a single, decisive act of injustice today can prevent 1,000 greater injustices born of chaos tomorrow. This is the cold calculus of power. It is not about being good or evil. It is about being effective or irrelevant. While the idealist is paralyzed, waiting for the world to grant him permission to act, the prince grants it to himself. He understands that reality does not bend to morality. Morality is the name given to the order imposed by force. The very concepts of just and unjust are luxuries, defined by those who have already won the war. To win that war, you must first survive it. And survival demands that you see the world with unclouded eyes, recognizing the poison of hope for what it is, and embracing the liberating, terrifying power of necessity. For while the naive pray for justice, the prince acts out of necessity. Reality does not bow to morality, morality bows to force. Comment: necessity is my law, to internalize this antidote and subscribe to learn how to apply it. You have taken the antidote. The fever dream of a benevolent, equitable world has broken, leaving behind the cold, clear dawn of reality. You no longer look upon the landscape of human affairs and ask, what is fair? You ask, what is necessary? This is the beginning of wisdom, but it is only the beginning. An animal understands necessity. It kills because it must eat. It flees because it must survive. To transcend the animal, to become a prince, you must move beyond merely reacting to necessity. You must learn to command it. You must become more than a survivor. You must become an architect. For justice is not a ghost to be exorcised or a force to be placated. In the hands of a master, it is a building material. It is the marble from which you will carve the facade of your state, the steel with which you will frame your power, and the mortar that will bind the people to your will. The naive believe justice is found. The powerful understand it is constructed. And to build, you must first master the two fundamental tools of this dark craft: the surgeon's scalpel and the people's rage. Let us first examine the scalpel, what Machiavelli called the economy of violence, or crueltà ben usate, cruelties well used. The common mind, still clouded by the poison of hope, imagines justice as a gentle, restorative process. It pictures drawn-out trials, proportionate responses, and the possibility of rehabilitation. These are the fantasies of a secure and decadent society. In the real world, where power is being forged or defended, such methods are not only a luxury, they are a lethal indulgence. Indecisive, prolonged, and piecemeal punishments do not heal the body politic. They create 1,000 weeping wounds that never close. They breed resentment, signal weakness, and invite conspiracy. A leader who is constantly punishing small transgressions is seen not as just, but as nagging and insecure. His state is not one of order, but of perpetual low-grade infection. This is the path of crueltà mal usate, cruelty is badly used, and it always leads to ruin. The prince understands that the foundation of his state is security, and security is the highest form of justice he can offer his subjects. For what good is abstract fairness to a man whose shop is being looted, or whose family is threatened by factional warfare? The master strategist, therefore, views his necessary acts of cruelty not as a moral failing, but as a surgical intervention. The surgeon who discovers a cancerous growth does not attempt to reason with it. He does not cut it out piece by piece over many months, hoping it will reform. Such a humane approach would guarantee the patient's death. Instead, he acts with shocking, decisive violence. He cuts deep, removing not only the tumor but a margin of healthy tissue around it, ensuring no trace of the sickness remains. The act is brutal, immediate, and, in its localized destruction, profoundly unjust to the cells that are sacrificed. Yet this single swift act of calculated brutality is what saves the entire organism. This is the model for well-used cruelty. When you take power, or when your power is challenged, the injuries you must inflict must be done all at once. They must be so sudden, so total, and so overwhelming that your opponents are left with no capacity or spirit for retaliation. The shock of the blow must be greater than the memory of the pain. Execute the ringleaders, dismantle their networks, confiscate their assets, and erase their legacy in a single, terrifying stroke. This singular event, monstrous as it may appear, serves to purchase 1,000 days of peace. The people witnessing this awesome display of will be stunned into obedience. They may fear you, but they will not hate you, because your violence had a clear and immediate end. You are not a bloody tyrant who delights in suffering. You are a severe but effective founder of order. You have performed the necessary surgery. The state is stabilized. That, in its ultimate consequence, is the most profound justice a ruler can provide. Now, once the internal foundation is secured with the scalpel, the architect must turn his attention to the facade. He must manage the perceptions of the masses, and for this he wields his second tool, the channeling of popular hatred. The common people possess an eternal and unquenchable thirst for retribution. They harbor a deep and abiding resentment for the powerful, the wealthy, and the privileged, what Machiavelli called I grandi, the great ones. This resentment is a permanent feature of the human condition, a river of discontent that flows beneath every society. The foolish ruler tries to dam this river. He preaches unity, calls for forgiveness, and attempts to suppress the people's grievances. In doing so, he makes himself the enemy of the people's most cherished emotion. The pressure builds behind his dam of platitudes until inevitably it bursts, and he is the first to be swept away in the flood. The wise prince never tries to stop this river. He digs canals. He understands that this popular rage is not a threat, but a magnificent source of energy to be harnessed and redirected. The prince's masterstroke is to position himself not as a member of the elite, but as the champion of the common man, the instrument of their righteous anger. He does not create the people's desire for justice. He simply gives it a name, a face, and a target. And the target, by a remarkable coincidence, is always his own enemy. A rival family, a competing faction, a group of wealthy nobles who stand in the way of his absolute authority. These become the designated objects of public scorn. He initiates grand public spectacles of justice. He stages dramatic trials, accusing his rivals of corruption, of treason, of crimes against the very people he claims to protect. He seizes their estates and, in a gesture of calculated magnanimity, redistributes a portion of the wealth, ensuring the people feel they have received their fair share. He does not need to invent crimes. He need only amplify existing resentments and direct the ensuing firestorm. In this grand theater, he achieves three critical objectives simultaneously. First, he physically eliminates a threat to his power. Second, he satisfies the population's craving for a scapegoat, earning their gratitude and affection. Third, and most importantly, he solidifies his own reputation as a just and benevolent ruler, the stern father who protects his children from the wolves. He has given the people the justice they craved, all while using their passion to consolidate his own unassailable position. He has weaponized their morality against his enemies. These two principles are the twin pillars of the architect's new order. With the economy of violence, He performs the brutal, necessary acts required to establish a stable foundation, ensuring all internal threats are neutralized before they can fester. With the channeling of popular hatred, he constructs the public-facing edifice of his rule, presenting himself as the ultimate arbiter of fairness and the protector of the common citizen. Notice the profound irony. To secure his state, he must be willing to commit acts of breathtaking injustice. Yet to maintain his state, he must appear to be the greatest champion of justice the world has ever known. He is both the brutal surgeon and the compassionate physician. He understands that power is not a static object to be possessed, but a dynamic performance to be endlessly staged. Justice, therefore, is not a moral compass to guide his actions. It is his script, his stage, and his most convincing mask. He who masters its architecture does not simply rule a city. He rules the reality of everyone living within it. You have been given the architect's tools. You understand that stability is forged in the crucible of a single decisive cruelty, and that the allegiance of the masses can be purchased with the blood of a well-chosen scapegoat. But tools are useless in the hands of one who is afraid to wield them. The finest sword is but a heavy piece of steel to the man whose spirit recoils from its purpose. The most profound challenge you now face is not external. It does not lie in the plots of your rivals or the discontent of the people. The final and most formidable war is the one that must be waged within the confines of your own soul. Before you can command a state, you must achieve absolute sovereignty over yourself. This requires an act of profound psychological violence, the methodical execution of the lesser man who lives within you. This is the citizen, the subject, the man who was raised to believe in the very codes of fairness you must now dismantle. He is the voice of your inherited conscience, the ghost of your naive education, and he must be silenced forever. This internal abdication is the true coronation of the prince. You must consciously step out of the ranks of the governed and ascend to a state of profound and terrifying isolation. The citizen within you is governed by laws. The sovereign is the source of law. The citizen seeks approval from a higher authority. The sovereign is the highest authority. The citizen feels the sting of injustice. The sovereign recognizes it only as a variable in his calculations. This is the solitude of the summit. There is no one to whom you can appeal, no pre-existing moral framework to vindicate your actions, no God who will whisper that your necessary brutalities are secretly just. You are alone with your decisions and their consequences. To hesitate in this ascent, to retain some sentimental attachment to the man you once were, is to invite disaster. Any lingering belief that you are subject to the same moral universe as your followers will create a fatal dissonance in your will. You will act, but you will act with a divided mind. Your cruelty will be hesitant, your generosity will be suspect, and your resolve will crumble at the first sign of moral pressure. You must kill the citizen so the prince can be born. This is not a metaphor. It is a prerequisite. Once this internal transformation is complete, once you have accepted the chilling burden of becoming the sole arbiter of right and wrong within your domain, you can begin the external work. Power, you see, is not a private possession to be hidden away. It is a public performance. The masses do not understand the intricate mechanics of statecraft, the grim necessities of survival, or the cold logic of your decisions. They understand what they see. They respond to symbols, to gestures, to grand theater. Therefore, you must make justice a spectacle, and you must be its chief actor and director. The state must become a stage upon which your authority is endlessly dramatized. The twin pillars of this performance are ostentatious reward and exemplary punishment. Both must be public, both must be memorable, and both must serve to reinforce the central narrative, that you are the fountainhead from which all fortune and all ruin flow. When you reward a loyal servant, do not do so quietly. Do it in the full light of the public square. Elevate him from obscurity to prominence. Bestow upon him titles, lands, and gold that exceed all expectation. This act is not for his benefit alone. It is a lesson for every man who witnesses it. It plants a powerful seed of ambition in their hearts. It teaches them that the path to glory lies not in dissent or private enterprise, but in absolute, unwavering service to your will. Your calculated generosity becomes a magnet, drawing the aspirations of all ambitious men towards you. Conversely, when you must punish, your actions must be a lesson etched in the public memory with a blade of ice and fire. A traitor, a conspirator, a dissenter, these must not simply be imprisoned or quietly dispatched. Their ruin must be a public masterpiece of terror. The punishment must be imaginative, it must be disproportionate, and it must be imbued with a terrible symbolism that speaks directly to the fears of the populace. Cesare Borgia, a master of this art, once had a treacherous lieutenant, Ramiro de Orco, cut in 2 pieces and left in the piazza for all to see. With this single gruesome spectacle, Borgia pacified an entire province. He did not deliver a speech or issue a decree. He staged a visceral drama that communicated his power more effectively than 1,000 words. He demonstrated that while his favor was a ladder to the heavens, his displeasure was a gateway to a hell of his own making. In this theater of justice, you are not merely enforcing laws, you are conditioning the emotions of your subjects, creating a political climate of awe, fear, and profound respect for your authority. The final and most sophisticated layer of this monopoly is the appropriation of language itself. The man who controls the material world may rule for a day. The man who controls the meaning of words rules for a generation. Physical force can compel obedience, but control over the lexicon compels consent. You must seize the very vocabulary of morality and redefine it to serve your purpose. Your most self-interested actions must be swathed in the language of the collective good. An aggressive war of conquest is never an invasion. It is a preemptive liberation or the establishment of a secure border. The silencing of a political opponent is not censorship. It is a measure to protect public discourse from misinformation and sedition. Crushing taxes levied to fund your ambitions are not expropriation. They are a shared contribution to our national greatness. The key is to never concede the moral high ground, even when, especially when, your actions are at their most pragmatic and ruthless. You must become the chief lexicographer of the state. You define what is patriotic, what is stable, what is just, and most critically, what is treasonous. By controlling these definitions, you control the framework of the entire political debate. Anyone who opposes you is forced to argue on your terms. If they criticize your security measures, they can be branded as sympathizers with chaos and disorder. If they question your economic contributions, they are enemies of progress and the prosperity of the people. You force them into a position where their dissent itself appears immoral according to the very public virtues you have championed. This is the ultimate form of power. It transcends the need for constant violence because it colonizes the minds of your subjects. They begin to police themselves, moderating their own thoughts to align with the reality you have constructed. Your will ceases to be an external force acting upon them. It becomes an internal principle guiding them. You do not simply command your subjects. You command the language in which they think, ensuring that even their silent dissent must borrow from the vocabulary he has provided. You have learned to poison your enemies with the very hope that once paralyzed you. You have mastered the architecture of selective justice and seized a monopoly on the language of morality itself. Now, before we unveil the final act of forging a world in your own image, ensure you are subscribed. For creation is the ultimate power, reserved for gods and for princes. To merely react, to manage, to reform, these are the tasks of stewards and administrators. The legacy of a true prince is not found in what he maintained, but in what he began. The ultimate expression of power is not to win the game as it is played. It is to sweep the old board from the table and replace it with one of your own design. This is the moment of the founding act, a cataclysmic rupture with the past that renders all previous notions of justice and injustice obsolete. It is the purest expression of virtue, the strategic will of a singular individual imposing its form upon the chaotic matter of fortuna. This founding act is not a mere adjustment or a policy shift. It is a fundamental reordering of reality. Machiavelli held a special reverence for the great founders, Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, because they did not inherit their power through legitimate means. They forged it out of nothingness, armed only with their own audacity and a unique opportunity. They introduced, in his words, new modes and orders. Think of this as a controlled demolition of the existing political and social structure, followed by the immediate construction of a new edifice upon the cleared ground. This is the moment when all accumulated power is risked in a single decisive stroke. It could be the sudden promulgation of a new constitution that centralizes all authority in your hands, the introduction of a disruptive technology that makes the old power brokers irrelevant, or a swift, ruthless purge of the entire old guard, replacing them overnight with a new class of men loyal only to you. The key to this act is its totality and its velocity. It must be a lightning strike, not a rising tide. As Machiavelli instructs, injuries ought to be done all at once so that, being tasted less, they offend less. The shock and awe of the event must be so profound that it overwhelms society's capacity to resist. It creates a new reality before the old one has even finished dying. This act is the apotheosis of necessity. It is not undertaken out of malice, but from the cold understanding that old structures, with their entrenched interests and ancient grievances, cannot be reformed. They must be shattered. To attempt a gradual change is to invite 1,000 cuts from 1,000 vested interests. You would bleed out your political capital, your energy, and your will, only to see your reforms diluted and ultimately reversed. The Founding Act bypasses this war of attrition. It is a quantum leap. One moment, the world operates under one set of rules. The next, it operates under yours. The old complaints about fairness and precedent are instantly rendered meaningless, like a lawsuit filed in a court that no longer exists. You have not addressed their grievances. You have dissolved the very framework that gave them meaning. This is the ultimate triumph over the trap of fairness. You do not argue with the old order, you erase it. This act of creation is the most dangerous and exhilarating moment in the life of a prince. It is the point where history holds its breath, waiting to see if you will be remembered as a founder or as a failed tyrant. But the flash of the lightning is not the storm. A new order conceived in a moment of violence and genius will perish just as quickly unless it is immediately grounded in the mundane soil of human habit. The true work of the founder begins the morning after the revolution. The objective now shifts from disruption to consolidation, from demolition to a process we shall call the naturalization of power. Your new reality, which is currently an artificial and fragile construct imposed by force, must be made to seem natural, inevitable, and eternal. It must seep into the bones of the state, becoming the way things have always been done. This is achieved not through further spectacle, but through the deliberate and patient construction of new institutions, routines, and traditions. You must establish new courts that operate on your new legal principles. You create new educational systems that teach history from a perspective that legitimizes your rise to power. You promote new festivals and public holidays that celebrate the mythology of your founding act. Every aspect of daily life, from commerce to worship, must be subtly re-engineered to reinforce your new order. Old symbols are torn down and replaced with yours. The very calendar might be reformed to date from your ascension. This is not mere vanity. It is profound psychological statecraft. Human beings are creatures of habit and ritual. By reshaping their routines, you reshape their thoughts. Over time, the memory of the world before you begins to fade. A new generation is born that has known nothing else. For them, your order is not a choice. It is the unquestioned landscape of their existence. The justice you have defined is no longer perceived as an imposition, but as a natural law. Your power becomes invisible, like the air they breathe, everywhere present but nowhere questioned. This is the final victory. The true sign of absolute power is not the roar of the crowd or the fear in the eyes of your enemies. It is the quiet, unassuming acceptance of your order as the default state of the world. Your will has become their reality. Your audacious act of creation has been laundered by time into the fabric of tradition. And so we arrive at the final, brutal lesson. Justice is not a truth to be discovered in the world. It is a vacuum. It is an empty throne, a hollow crown waiting for a claimant. The naive and the idealistic spend their lives gesturing at this emptiness, crying out for some higher power to fill it with equity and compassion. They die in protest, their voices unheard, their potential squandered. The Machiavellian prince understands the true nature of this void. He sees it not as a problem to be lamented, but as an opportunity to be seized. The call of history, the challenge of power, is to have the courage to step into that emptiness yourself, to occupy that throne, and to fill that void with your own will, your own order, and your own definition of justice. The ultimate power is not a matter of goodness or wickedness, for these are merely the judgments of posterity, written by those who inherit the order you create. The ultimate power is a matter of efficacy. It is the capacity to see the world as it is, a chaotic interplay of interest and force, and to possess the fortitude to impose a lasting pattern upon it. The goal is not merely to win, but to build a state, a legacy, a structure of power that endures the relentless erosion of time and fortune. You do not find justice. You do not demand it. You are the one who forges it in the fire of your will, and in doing so, you build a throne that outlasts the flesh and bone of its creator.